Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Good idea, because people will come late, fashionably late. You know that one, so moving is good. Well, here we go again with philosophy. And some of you haven't been with us, so I'll do the easy part first, which is what we did yesterday, a little background. That's the easy part. It's the story leading up to the philosophy. One of the things that we heard in the morning class is that Shukadeva Goswami deliberately did not describe the pastime of Krishna sending the resident of Vrindavan back to the spiritual world when the plan was that his pastimes had concluded. We're still getting organized here. The section that we're reading from, it's Uddhava Gita, and it's just before Krishna's departure from Dwarka. Actually, he left very near Prabhas, which is not far from Dwarka, but in any case, the conclusion of Krishna's pastimes. Krishna did not return to Vrindavan, although he was petitioned on several occasions by different devotees, especially Balaram, to return to Vrindavan. He didn't. Twice he sent others. Once was he sent Uddhava from Mathura, and then later Balaram went from Dwarka to Vrindavan, and both of them spent several months. Balaram specifically is described in Brihat Bhagavatamrita that Balaram, when he returned, he promised the gopis again and again, I'll bring him, I'm his older brother, I'll bring him, I'll tell him he's got to come. But Krishna didn't come. And one of the reasons, at least a reason given by our acharyas, is that Krishna didn't want to go to Vrindavan until all the demons were killed, because if he went to Vrindavan, the demons would know that Krishna liked very much the residents of Vrindavan. And since he liked the residents of Vrindavan, if he went there, they would harass them. So he didn't go until the final of the big demons was killed, and that was Dantavakra. Dantavakra. We don't hear so much about Dantavakra, but he was one of the Jai and Vijay pair, Shishupal and Dantavakra. It wasn't Kamsa, it was Dantavakra. So we heard from Padma Purana, the detail is described. From Padma Purana we heard Krishna killed Shishupal. He returned to Dwarka, but Shalva found out that Shishupal, his buddy, was killed. So Shalva came to attack Krishna in Dwarka. Krishna came out of Dwarka, and, very interesting, Shalva with his airplane and the whole thing, and he was finished. And Krishna didn't return to Dwarka because Krishna was visited by Narada Muni. This is from Padma Purana now. Krishna was visited by Narada Muni, who informed him, what? Dantavakra is looking for you, wants to kill you, because he wants to take revenge for you having killed his buddy, Shishupal. And he's heading for Mathura. So Krishna mounted his chariot, which traveled as fast as the mind, which is really fast, and he went to the western gate of Mathura. He had a big encounter with Dantavakra, and he was killed. Dantavakra was killed. And the commentators say, Vishwanath and others, Jiva Goswami also says, even today, on the western side, just outside the gate of Mathura, there's a village that bears Dantavakra's name. That's where he was killed. So Krishna decided, I'm so close, I'm in just outside Mathura, let me, and now all the demons are killed, I'll go to Vrindavan. So we don't hear about it. In Srimad Bhagavatam, the explanation given is Maharaj Parikshit Shukadev didn't want Maharaj Parikshit to hear how easy it was for the residents of Vrindavan and how difficult it was for the residents of Dwarka, his relatives. So he didn't narrate, but it's in Padma Purana, and Krishna went and spent 2 months in Vrindavan. And he did many things, but one of those things he did was he made arrangements for the closure of his pastimes. The pastimes began by demigods taking birth in the members of the Yadu dynasty. And some of the members of the Yadu dynasty had, made their way to Vrindavan. So, 4 things. The demigods, the partial expansions of the demigods were sent back to the demigod realm. Some of those demigods went with the eternal associates of Krishna back to the spiritual world. A Vimana descended and took them to the spiritual world. A third thing is an expansion of all of them entered into aprakat stage, or the unmanifest stage of Krishna's eternal pastimes. And the fourth thing is an expansion of Krishna went back to Dwarka to close up his pastimes in Dwarka. So Krishna is now back in Dwarka, making a plan, pastime, for ending his pastimes and bringing the associates from Dwarka back to their abodes, to the eternal realm. So it was done in a very interesting way. Starting in chapters, so now we're in Canto 11, chapters 4 and 5. Chapters 4 and 5. Narada is in Dwarka, and Narada pays a visit to Vasudeva, Krishna's father. And Vasudeva takes the opportunity to inquire from Narada about transcendental knowledge, saying, I was so much absorbed in my relationship with Krishna as my son, I didn't take the time to ask transcendental knowledge questions. So he starts asking, and Narada gives really, really important instructions. And after that, chapters 4 and 5, chapter 6 begins with Vasudeva has a big yajna at his home or palace, and many sages and brahmanas are invited, and it's a big event. And after the big event, the brahmanas are remunerated, and then they retire for a day in a different place than Dwarka itself, but nearby, where it's a sacred place and it was known for what they were doing. And then came the big mistake. The big mistake was, by Krishna's arrangement, Samba, one of Krishna's sons, dressed up as a woman, and some boys came with Samba and were making fun of the brahmanas. That was the big mistake. The other boys said, this lady is very shy, she can't show her face because she's so shy. but she wants to know whether the child that's because the sari had a lump of iron underneath, whether it'll be a boy or a girl. Can you say? They said, that which is under the sari of Samba is going to bring the destruction of the Yadu dynasty for your offense to the Brahmanas. So the boys were grief-stricken because they knew that was a serious, it wasn't just talk. So they went back to the king, they went back to Dwarka, informed Ugrasena what had happened. Ugrasena consulted his ministers, and it was decided that that lump of iron should be ground into powder, and the powder should be thrown into the sea. So they did that, except for one part of the lump of iron wouldn't grind no matter what they did, so they threw that into the sea also. And that lump of iron that wouldn't grind was swallowed by a fish. The fish was caught by a fisherman. A hunter purchased the fish. When he opened up the fish, he found the lump of iron. He thought, fantastic, I'll make the head of an arrow. And he used that head of an arrow to shoot, which hit the heel of Krishna, and Krishna died from that. You don't die from a heel wound. But it was a pastime of Krishna. Prabhupada explains specifically to trick the atheists into confirming their mistaken understanding that Krishna is an ordinary person. The ordinary persons don't die from a heel wound. But that was Krishna's plan. And then all the powder that was thrown into the sea washed up to the shore of Prabhas. And Krishna instructed the Yadu dynasty, because Prabhas is known for a place to go where one has offended Brahmanas. And he gives some history, how Prabhas is a place where persons have been, the offense to a Brahmana has been mitigated by conducting proper festivals and rituals in Prabhas. So you should all go, Krishna instructed. So Krishna is now alone. We're still in chapter 6. And the demigods come, headed by Brahma and Shiva and so forth. They offer wonderful prayers, very similar to the prayers of the demigods to Krishna in the womb of Devaki, the very beginning of his appearance. So similar, this prayer, that prayer, the other prayer. And then finally they conclude saying, you fulfilled your promise. You appeared to kill the demons. The last of the demons are now killed. So if you wish, you may return. And they disappear. So Krishna is now alone, considering. The plan has already been set for the departure of the Yadu dynasty. But there's one member I'd like to remain behind, Uddhava. I'd like two things. I'd like Uddhava to go to Badrinath and give my association through my teachings to him, to them. Because I appeared in this world to give my association to my devotees, but I didn't make it to Badrinath, so he can go on my behalf, my representative. And the other was he can travel about and give these teachings. And with that, Super Soul sent Uddhava to see Krishna in Dwarka. There were two meetings. I'll say it again. There were two meetings between Krishna and Uddhava. And the Uddhava Gita takes place in Dwarka. The second meeting takes place at Prabhas. Just before Krishna is about to depart, Uddhava does a U-turn, goes back to Prabhas. And that's where Maitreya was, by the bank of the river Saraswati, etc. So Uddhava comes to Krishna. We're still in chapter 6. Uddhava comes to Krishna and says, take me with you. And then the second request is, please remove the obstacle of my worldly attachment so that I can understand you fully. Because worldly attachment is an obstacle to understanding Krishna fully. And that's the end of chapter 6. Chapter 7 begins with Krishna responding. And after hearing Krishna's response, Uddhava says, I don't get it. Could you do it again? And so Krishna does it again. And he does it again in 3 chapters, 7, 8, 9, by describing a meeting between King Yadu and an Avaduta Brahmin, where King Yadu is touring his kingdom, sees an Avaduta Brahmin, and is very surprised because he's young and handsome and this and that and the other thing, but he's so utterly detached. So he asks the Brahmin, how did you come to this condition of complete detachment? And then there's 3 chapters of what the Avaduta Brahmana gives lessons in detachment, because that was Uddhava's question. And there's 24 gurus that include the sky, the air, mountains and trees, rivers, birds, a snake, a girl with bangles, bumblebees, a prostitute. It's not like they sat him down and gave him lessons, but they, just by observing them, he understood the temporary nature of things of this world and be detached from the temporary things of this world. And then it leaves the door open for becoming attached to the eternal. And the only one of all those instructions that she specifically speaks of becoming attached to the eternal is Pingala. The others are just like his observations. And Supersoul giving him understandings through the agency of those energies or insects or things of this world, trees, things of this world. So that ends chapter 9, 7, 8, 9. And then chapter 10, so we're on chapter 11. Chapter 10 is Krishna's essentially explaining how to get to that stage of detachment that the Avaduta Brahmana was in. And it's knowledge and detachment. And Krishna goes through detachment even from the aspiration for heavenly happiness. And he gives his reasons why. And he deals with, explicitly, with Jaimini's teaching of Karma Kanda, Karma Mimamsa philosophy. I mean, he doesn't say Jaimini's name, but it's Jaimini's philosophy. There are philosophers who say, and he says what Jaimini says, and then refutes it. So don't go for the temporary, and even don't go for the heavenly temporary, because they're all temporary. They're of the same impermanent nature. Go for the eternal. And that ends chapter 10. In chapter 11, at the end of chapter 10 comes a difficult question. The difficult question is, Uddhava says, I don't understand this. I've heard it said that one living entity can be eternally conditioned, nitya baddha, and the same living entity can be eternally liberated, nitya siddha. And that's a contradiction, because nitya means eternally. So if it's eternally this, then it's not eternally that, and vice versa. Could you explain? That's the end of chapter 10. And then chapter 11 is all this heavy philosophy on how to understand that one. Now, it's not so different. I would say it this way. What's in Bhagavad Gita is now in chapter 11 being expanded more completely. The undergraduate study is now moving into the graduate study. So if you don't like graduate studies, then you're going to be really bored, because it's philosophy that's a graduate study level, And I'll try to make it interesting, but it's philosophy. And philosophy can be a little, difficult sometimes. So we're in Dwarka, and we're listening to Krishna and Uddhava have a conversation. And it's on verse number 2 of Canto 11, Chapter 11. On what's the difference, there's 3 topics in the chapter, but what's the difference between Nitya Siddha and Nitya Buddha? What does it mean? How to understand it? Krishna says, just as a dream is merely a creation of one's intelligence but has no actual substance. We discussed this word substance. We'll hear some more about it. Similarly, material, shoka, lamentation, moha, illusion, sukha, happiness, dukkha, distress, and the acceptance of the material body under the influence of Maya are all creations of my illusory energy. We're getting like a, high magnification look at what Maya is. In other words, material existence has no essential reality, like a dream. Now, it's not, essential reality doesn't mean it's false. It just it's not sustaining. That's, substantial reality. Okay, Bhaktisiddhanta's translation. Just as a dream is an illusory creation of the mind, so lamentation, illusion, happiness, distress, and the bodily conception of life are simply creations of my illusory energy. That is to say, material existence is essentially illusory. That's the BBT purport. The word deha apati is accepting the body, indicates that the living entity falsely identifies himself with the external material body and thus transmigrates from one body to another. Apati. Like, we're very familiar in ISKCON with Sharanagati, the term Sharanagati. Yes? There's another term, Sharanapati. Very similar. Sharana is the same beginning part. Sharanagati, agati means going to the position of Sharana, and apati means having obtained Sharana. Bhaktisiddhanta used both. Sharanapati. So apati also indicates great suffering or misfortune. Why? Because of such false identification, under the influence of illusion, the living entity experiences the miserable symptoms described here. Maya means the false concept of that anything can exist without Lord Krishna for any purpose, or for any purpose other than the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. Now, just to keep it interesting, some of you like reading Srimad Bhagavatam, and some of you know that in Srimad Bhagavatam there's 4 essential verses out of the whole 18,000 verses that summarize the whole of the Bhagavatam. And one of those is this one that was just stated in the purport. So the one of those is, this is Vishnu speaking to Brahma, and he says, please know that if something is seen to exist and have value, separate from me, the personality of Godhead, know that to be my illusory energy. So seeing things separate from Krishna. And then there's some value. It's an enjoyable entity or enjoyable object. That is Krishna's illusory energy. Living entities covered by illusory energy think that way. Say it either this way, backwards or forwards. Maya means to see things separately from Krishna. When you turn away from Krishna, then you're covered by Maya. You turn back to Krishna and Maya is gone. When you're looking at the sun, you don't see shadow. When you turn your back to the sun, you see shadow. But you don't see shadow if your face is towards the sun. It's there, but you don't see it. It's not acting upon you. But if you see the shadow, it can be scary. Dark. Although the conditioned living entities are trying to enjoy material sense gratification, the result is always painful, and such painful, so that there may be some momentary sensation that says, but involvement in the material energy is painful because it means birth, death, disease, and old age. So moment to moment, there may be some sensation that says pleasure. However, step back from that momentary pleasure, and the big picture is there's birth, death, disease, and old age. It's unwanted. And being attracted to the sense pleasure buys us into the continued cycle of birth and death, which is not pleasurable. In other words, the ultimate purpose of the material creation is to bring the living entity back to the loving devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, even the sufferings of the material world may be seen as the transcendental mercy of the personality of Godhead. The conditioned soul, imagining that the material objects are meant for his personal enjoyment, bitterly laments the loss of such objects. In this verse, the example is given of a dream in which the material intelligence creates many illusory objects. Well, it's not just the material intelligence, but the material intelligence is assisted by Prakriti. So the material intelligence is taking dictation from the senses. I want pleasure. I want one of those. I want something, whatever it is. So material intelligence reports to the mind, and mind says, look, can you get me one of those? And material intelligence says, yes, sir, I'll go to work. And so objects are created by material intelligence. And then the objects can be used for service to Krishna, or they can be used for sense enjoyment. Looking at the harmonium, I learned something the other day. Harmonium is, at least I always thought, it's a traditional Indian instrument. Well, it turns out it's not. It turns out historically it came from Europe. It was one of those accordion things, and then in India they figured out how to make these. And then it's become a kind of traditional instrument for kirtan and bhajan. But someone with some intelligence thought how to make an accordion into harmonium and how to use it in glorification of Krishna. Now, some people use harmonium for other reasons than glorifying Krishna. So the intelligence is helping to fashion the object through the mind. So there's a conception, like here's a chair, and before there was a chair, there was a conception of chair, and then somebody built the chair. So we're using it, and we can be used for different purposes, but if you use it in Krishna's service, or a microphone can be used for different services, different purposes. So intelligence can help fashion objects. But then what's the intention behind that intelligence, material or spiritual? Material intelligence creates many illusory objects. Similarly, our polluted material consciousness creates the false impression of material sense gratification. But this phantasmagoria, being devoid of Krishna consciousness, has no real existence. No real existence in the sense that it's temporary. The sensation of pleasure is temporary, followed by the sensation of misery. Minimally, birth, death, disease, old age. The temporary sensation is temporary. There's no real substance. Thus, no real existence, no permanent existence. By surrendering to polluted material consciousness, the living entity is afflicted with innumerable troubles. The only solution is to see Lord Krishna within everything and everything within Lord Krishna. That's another one of the Chaturshloki verses, the last of the 4. Thus, one understands that Lord Krishna is the supreme enjoyer, the proprietor of everything, and the well-wishing friend of all living beings. Paragraph. In material illusion, there is no understanding of one's eternal spiritual body, nor is there knowledge of the absolute truth. Therefore, material existence, even in its most sophisticated or pious form, is always foolishness. One should not misunderstand the example of the dream to mean that the material world has no real existence. When you're dreaming something, you're dreaming something. It's fleeting. There's something going on in your dream, but that's something that's going on in your dream may cause you to laugh or cry or smile or scream or something. You wake up screaming. And it was just a dream. But there was something happening with your perspiration, your heart palpitating, and something, it's in the mind, but it's not substantial. It's fleeting only. So, therefore, material existence, even in its most sophisticated or pious form, is always foolishness. One should not misunderstand the example of the dream to mean that the material world has no real existence. Material nature is the manifestation of the Lord's external potency, just as the spiritual sky is a manifestation of the Lord's internal potency. Although material objects are subject to transformation and thus have no permanent existence, the material energy is real because it comes from the supreme reality, Lord Krishna. It is only our false acceptance of the material body as the factual self and our foolish dream that the material world is meant for our pleasure that they have no real existence. They're merely mental concoctions. One should cleanse oneself of material designations. That's from yesterday's topic, material designations. Material designations, upadhis. I think most of us are familiar with the word upadhi. Upadhi means designation. I was using the example yesterday. I'm a sannyasi. Here's my flag, my sannyas robe. So this says, people ask that don't know, is there some reason you're dressed in this color? It means I'm living a life of renunciation. A monk, because people in America know that word. A Krishna monk. But that's not my eternal identity. Because before I was something else, and later I'm going to be something else. Leave this body, and who knows what I'll be. So, it's a designation. And each of us have, a designation. The covering of who we really are. Designation. So, what was yesterday's verse was, even the idea of becoming liberated, that's a designation. Being conditioned is a designation because it's not the soul itself. It's a designation. In the temporal sense, you can say those things, but in the absolute sense, we're neither liberated nor conditioned, or becoming liberated. Because the soul is in a different category than becoming liberated. Okay, so one should cleanse oneself of material designations and wake up to the all-pervading reality of the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. That's the BBT purport. Now I'm going to read Bhaktisiddhanta's purport. The illusioned soul forgets his eternal existence and imagines that there is no supreme truth. Even in its most advanced stages, material life is simply ignorance. Just as when one dreams, there is no question of a pleasant dream being more real than a nightmare. So heavenly and hellish material existences are equally illusory. That was from chapter 10. Same message being repeated here. This material world is a manifestation of the Lord's external energy, just as the eternal spiritual sky is a manifestation of his internal energy. Although material, so it's true in the sense that it's Krishna's energy, but it's impermanent, and thus it's said to be of no substance. Now you see it, now you don't. I mean, like the house that we're in. Once upon a time, wasn't here. Now we're here. And after some time, it's not going to be here. However long that is, it's going to be something else. So it's impermanent. It exists, and we're using it, but it's not, there's no substance in the house or the chair or the microphone or the body or our happiness or distress or anything that's of the inferior energy. No, we're moving through it. We're engaged with it. But when we engage with it, the understanding of what it is should be clear. Now, one of the things that's going to guarantee that you won't is turn your attention away from Krishna, and you won't. You'll see it, that's it. And you'll deal with it as it's it. And when you do like that, it has its consequences. There's a struggle. And we don't like the struggle. We want happiness. But we have to struggle. So turn attention away from Krishna, and you forget who you are spiritually. You forget who Krishna is spiritually, and the material world is it. With its ups and downs, happiness and distress, all these things that are in the verse, shoka, moha, etc. This material world is a manifestation, we read that. Although material nature is infinitely mutable and thus has no stable condition, it is real and not simply an illusion like a mirage in the desert, because it is an emanation from the supreme reality. It is only our mistaking the material body as the self that constitutes illusion. One should therefore wake up from the dream of bodily identification and see the reality of the eternal supreme personality of Godhead. I'm not sure how to do this because I'll do this because it's philosophy, and people get restless when they have to sit through too much philosophy. It's my experience. Looking at your watch or looking at your phone thinking, I want to do something meaningful. So what I'll do is there's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary and Bhaktisiddhanta's gloss. I'll just start on the next verse, text number 3, and we'll see what happens after that. I'll probably just open and see if there's some discussion. Okay, here's Bhaktisiddhanta summarizing, it's short, what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary is. The nature of material bondage is being described in this verse. Lamentation, illusion, happiness, and distress are all related to the material body. Gross bodily designations are accepted by the subtle body. Gross bodily designations are accepted by the subtle body. And thus a living entity falsely identifies himself as the enjoyer of material nature. Material existence, which is full of lamentation and delusion, is not factual reality, because it is a temporary display of the Lord's illusory energy, external energy, just like a dream, and thus has no relation with the eternal spirit soul. Like a dream or like a magic trick or something like that. I mean, for me, a classic is, just to make it light, I remember in high school a few years ago, we used to have assembly. Do you guys still do that in school, public high school? Okay. So we had an assembly, and one assembly, they were all sitting there watching this guy on the stage, a magician, and he was doing magic tricks. You know, he didn't do the sawing somebody in half magic trick, but one of them, you know, that's the standard one. Here's a hat, and he pulled the hat inside out. He'd have somebody come out of the audience and take the hat and pull it inside and out. It's just a hat. There's no inside and outside of the hat. It's just a hat. And then he, hocus pocus, and reached in the hat and pulled out a rabbit, holding it by his ears. Poor guy. And it showed everybody the rabbit, and put the rabbit back in the hat, and then the rabbit disappeared. So what was all that about? There's just to keep it light, one of our temple presidents in Hartford, Connecticut. His name is Pyari Mohan. You know Pyari. So Pyari Mohan has one of the things that he does for fun, and he gets some family maintenance for it also, is he has magic tricks. So he goes to different places and does magic tricks. Now, I haven't taken a deep interest in it, but he does it sometimes at Rath Yatras. He's got a little booth over there, and he does magic tricks for the kids, so the parents can have fun, and Pyari's having fun doing magic tricks. So I don't know what they are, but so now you see it, now you don't kind of magic trick. So some of that, we know, some of that is just an optical illusion, or there's a sleight of hand. He pulls something, whatever they do it. It's not like he's got some mystic powers. It's just you don't see it, he does it, and then you don't see it, he puts it away, kind of thing. The Maya is like that. Now you see it, now you don't. However Krishna does it compared to how a magician does it, the principle is quite the same. It appears to be something that it isn't, and then it goes to something that it is. It's just a hat, or just whatever it is. So what the illusory energy is Krishna's external energy. That it is. And it takes different shapes and forms according to, ultimately it's resting upon misuse of free will of the living entity. This free will topic again. But we have a desire. Well, and if the desire potential is against Krishna or aversion to Krishna, if that's the option on the menu that we select, then Maya covers the living entity, and all kinds of things happen according to those desires apart from Krishna. And the mutable, endlessly mutable material energy takes different shapes. There are different kinds of chairs. There are different kinds of houses. There There are different kinds of everything. Different kinds of trees. Some are very nice. Some are poisonous. And so forth. So it has to do with desire. Then also, when we act on those desires, there's karma. So it gets more complicated. It's guna and karma. And we're bound up in this network of Maya that started from turning our back upon Krishna. We discussed this the other day. In Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami's language, it's Bahir Mukha. We know from the Shringa prayers. Bahir Nishringo, Hridaye Nishringo. Hridaye Nishringo, he's in the heart. Bahir, he's outside. He's everywhere. Like Prahlad said, he's everywhere. So Bahir is he's outside. So Bahir Mukha is turn your attention away from Krishna. Material existence is caused by, it's precipitated by, turn your attention away from Krishna. Forget Krishna. Now there's steps before completely just forgetting Krishna. We're going to talk about that this coming weekend at the Festival of the Holy Name. But turn your attention away from Krishna. What do you see? You see darkness. Turn away from the sun where you see shadow. And the darkness is the Maya. Maya covers a living entity by that one. And then comes material desire, comes material intelligence, comes material activity, comes, material existence, suffering and enjoying and stress and this and that and the other thing. One girl yesterday in the host family, was that you? Your question was, why do people suffer? Yes? That was a short question. Why is there suffering? And my answer was forgetfulness of Krishna. So this is taking that answer and going further with it, because once you understand what's the root cause of suffering, you have an idea how to get out of suffering. Very simple. Most of us probably came in the front door. So when it's time to leave, we go to the exit, which is how we came in. So how did we come into material existence tells us how to get out of material existence. Very simple. Forgetfulness of Krishna. And then the whole of material existence unfolds. And we're bound by it because we're in material consciousness. You act in material consciousness and there's bondage. You may not like the consequence. That's unhappiness or misery or suffering. We don't like the suffer. But we still have this attitude, that anti-Krishna attitude. Somewhere in there, rattling around. Some rebelliousness towards Krishna. And that keeps us bound. And even we may get, a little devotion. Back down again. Didn't. Right, Rukmini? So this is a lesson. Krishna's giving lessons to Uddhava, which means he's giving a lesson to us, how to get on the other side of that obstacle. And it's philosophy, but it's fact. So let's go on. Here's Vishwanath's commentary. Krishna explains how bondage is illusory, because that's what he said in the very first verse. This is verse number 2. Krishna explains how bondage is illusory. Deha patihi means, quote, acceptance of another body after giving up a body, or, quote, death of the body. Acceptance of a body takes place by avidya, or mayaya, No, they're not identical terms, but there's a lot of overlap between ignorance or avidya and maya, the illusory energy. By a relationship with a conditioning produced by maya. This conditioning arises only from identification of the jiva with his subtle body, or antakarana. Antakarana. There's a new term for many of us. I remember when I first came across it, it was like, what's that? And I did some search. I had somebody do some folio search and find out where are different places. And it's something like, the term vasana? When there's an impression in the mind, and it's so strongly, it's like repeated and repeated and repeated. There's a deep impression in the mind, a kind of reinforced impression in the mind, vasana. And then it's a certain tendency. From experience, then there's a certain tendency to whatever it is, whatever the tendency is, to become angry, or to smile, or to run in fear, or something. Antakarana is a little bit like that. It's the subtle body, but it's a kind of subtle body type, or a tendency towards, due to impressions within the subtle body. Something like that. I haven't come across like a really clear, concise definition. But anta means within, and karana means cause. Antakarana. The mind causes certainly feelings, and then when feelings, then we, there's some speech or some actions. But so behind the speech or action, there's something subtle. So antakarana has that kind of meaning. Anyway, this conditioning arises, material conditioning arises only from identification of the jiva with his subtle body, or antakarana. Because of this identification, one accepts the qualification of the subtle body, such as lamentation, illusion, happiness and distress, as one's own qualities. Like I know this devotee, it just really struck me. I'm the kind of person who... Now that's identifying with the antakarana. It's not who the person is, but I'm the kind of person who gets angry when people say something or something. I'm the kind of person who laughs when there's a nice joke, or I'm the kind of person who gets angry when people are mean, or I'm the kind of person who runs away when people are harsh or something. It's a subtle identifying with the emotions or the content of the mind. That's buying into the illusion of who we're not. It's just part of the whole machine of material existence. That's what's being described here. Thus, samsara, consisting of identity with lamentation and illusion, is not based on reality. Though lamentation and illusion actually exist as the creation of Maya, their relation with the jiva is false, produced by avidya. This is like the transformation, or khyati, of one's intelligence to produce a dream, which is false. I think I'll end because I've been stopping here and there and trying to make it a little entertaining and a little easier to understand, because it's graduate study time with the Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna explaining what is illusion and how does it impact. Having read this just this morning, listening to Prabhupada speak on the same topic, but it was to an audience in Los Angeles, so it wasn't with all this graduate study level stuff. But it was quite understandable, at least, because it was principle based, that, seeking happiness in the temporary when we're eternal is not going to bring happiness. And no matter how intelligent a scientist or this one or that one may be, it's not going to bring a solution to the problems of life. However good the intention may be, however strong their intelligence may be, the higher intelligence is to understand the temporary nature of that which is temporary and to look for a permanent happiness in the realm of the permanent. Because that's what real happiness is. Happiness is not temporal. Say it differently. Real happiness doesn't end. Real happiness continues. We all want happiness that doesn't end and continues to grow. That's what real happiness looks like. That's not what our experience is. So real intelligence to understand, how do I get that? Or, her question, why is there suffering? That's intelligence, frankly. Very intelligent. And then the next is, how do I get there? How do I get to what real happiness is instead of the place where it's not happiness? Or it's a mix of the temporary happiness, temporary distress. How do I get to the unmixed place? That's an intelligent question. And Prabhupada was saying to the devotees in Los Angeles, 1973, people aren't asking that question. It's a sign that they're not really intelligent. They may have MA, PhD, but it's not real intelligence. They can manipulate matter this way, that way, and mitigate the misery to some degree, but that mitigation leads to another misery. It leads to prolonging material existence minimally, because it's not the real solution. So what's the solution? The solution is to have a teacher that has teachings that takes one beyond the temporary. And that's what Krishna is doing here with Uddhava. Because that's what Uddhava has asked him. Can you take me beyond this obstacle to you? And the obstacle, I understand, is attachment to the temporary. But I can't do it. I've not been able to do it. And he's way up there compared to us. So, but Krishna is the best teacher. And, I'll end with this. At the end of one of these classes discussing philosophy, there was a couple of younger people, and I asked them specifically, be honest with me, how much of this did you understand? And they went, I said, I thought so. But the initial part was easy, the story that led up to the philosophy. That I could follow. But then my response was that that because it's transcendental sound vibration, because it's Krishna speaking, it's transcendental sound vibration, and it's having an impact on the soul, whether, our little binary processor mind can understand it or not. It's acting on the soul platform. And gradually, by hearing and hearing and hearing, the soul becomes purified and consciousness becomes awakened, and you start to understand things that you couldn't understand before. It's not a material subject matter. That it's not ascending knowledge, it's descending knowledge. It just works that way. And anyone that has had the experience of reading Srimad Bhagavatam for some period of time and not understanding everything, but you continue to read it with faith. And here's the experience. Your consciousness becomes elevated. And the world around you, this is my experience anyways, the world around you is the same world. And it's, it's getting weirder and weirder. That doesn't change. But your experience of it changes. At the consciousness level, it changes. Just from hearing. So though it's like, what? This is graduate study. I'm going back to Bhagavad Gita, undergraduate study. That's okay. Hearing is going to have an effect. And let's see what happens when we have some discussion. Because there was a question yesterday about what's the value of discussing. Specifically, we read together compared to reading by yourself. What's the benefit? This kind of subject matter. Bhagavatam is meant to be heard and discussed in the association of devotees. Why? Because it's pleasing to Krishna. When devotees come together, those who have attraction for him come together and hear about him, or hear his messages, etc. Krishna is pleased. That's why it's nice. There's something special about it. Okay, so any discussion?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So yesterday class you talked about this substantial thing. So transcendental sound vibration is also a substantial thing.
Yes.
So that's how it helps us, the soul to,
yes.
The hearing process helps the soul to gain the knowledge.
Yeah. It's of the same quality as the soul proper. You follow?
Yeah.
It's of the same, because it's of the same quality, the soul resonates.
Okay. Thank you, Maharaj.
Let me give a little visual. When I was very young, I had 3 sisters, and 2 of my 3 sisters, they liked playing piano. And so in our home, there was a piano, and periodically, every couple of years or whatever often happened, there was a piano tuner that would come to the home and tune the piano. So I watched the piano tuner to see what he would do. And he had this big case. It looked like, from the outside, it looked like a guitar case, but it wasn't a guitar case. He opened it up, and inside there's a whole series of rubber mallets and a tuning fork. A whole series of tuning forks and a couple of rubber mallets. So let's say you take out C, and he'd pull out the C tuning fork and hold it above the C string and hit the tuning fork. And what would happen, he didn't touch the tuning fork to the string, it would just vibrate. And as it vibrated the C string, not the other strings. But it vibrated the C string. And if it was in tune, it had this shape like this. And if it was out of tune, it was, some weird shape. So by looking at the shape of the movement of the C string, he could tighten it or loosen it, and here was how we would tune the piano. Then he put the C tuning fork away, and he pulled out the D tuning fork, and hit the D tuning fork, and hold it near the D string, and watch the vibration of the D string, and tighten it or loosen it until it was in tune. Went through the whole piano keyboard that way. A visual. Similarly, the sound vibration of Srimad Bhagavatam is of the same quality as the soul. And when you vibrate it, it vibrates the soul. It awakens the original consciousness of the soul. It just has that quality. It's not dependent upon your understanding it, not understanding it. Now, if you understand it, it has a certain relish. And when you become really elevated in Krishna consciousness, there's all kinds of rasa embedded within that sound vibration. That when you're not elevated in consciousness, you don't feel that taste. Well, you can feel something, but at least, minimally, it's resonating. The original consciousness of the soul is being resonated and stimulated. We talked about this yesterday, udipan, or stimulations of ecstatic love. I don't know how the rest of you felt, but I just read through, because it was from Jiva Goswami's Priti Sandarbha, and he was describing how some pastimes amplify the majesty of Krishna, some pastimes amplify the sweetness of Krishna, and there's different sweetnesses of Krishna. And he just went through different examples. And I was feeling like, wow, Krishna's really sweet. Just by hearing. And I'm not like Jiva Goswami, who's understanding and feeling all those feelings, or Shukadev Goswami, who's narrating all those feelings. But they're feeling something just by hearing and narrating. It has that potency. So even in the philosophy part, it's kind of like an alignment exercise to align the intelligence to reality with a capital R instead of illusion with a small I. We're used to illusion, and we're not aligned with reality. So it's helping to bring the intelligence component in alignment with reality. It takes a while, because we're not used to it. Anything we're not used to, it takes a while.
Thank you, Maharaj.
You have something? You raise your hand? Well?
Oh, Maharaj, I just want to hear again the last sentence that you read. I couldn't catch a word that you said, Kyati or something.
Okay.
Thank you. The very last sentence.
Okay, I see it. I'll read the last two because it's connected. Although lamentation and illusion actually exist as the creations of Maya, their relation with the jiva is false, produced by avidya. This is like the transformation, or kyatihi, of one's intelligence to produce a dream, which is false. So kyatihi is in the Sanskrit of text 3. Kyatihi, in the word for word, is merely an idea, or the transformation of one's intelligence to produce a dream. Kyatihi. Merely an idea. A dream is merely an idea. But in the dream, the idea is something. It's not absolutely non-existent, but it's not substantial. It's the now you see it, now you don't kind. Kyatihi. Merely an idea. Anything else in the room, or we're going to go to online?
So I have 3 questions, but on the first one, I was wondering, why Krishna, it seems like Krishna arranged that Sambha would offend the Brahmana so he could go back to the spiritual world, or did he not arrange that? Because, so if he did arrange that, then like why?
Why did he do it that way?
Yeah, why was he like so nice to the Vrindavan Vasis but not as nice to the Dwarka? What?
I heard Prabhupada speak on this point just this morning. Recording. And his explanation was, the men in Dwarka were Kshatriyas. The men and ladies in Vrindavan were Vaishyas. So the Kshatriyas were to remove themselves, and Krishna wanted them to be removed, but it was to be done in such a way that they would have to annihilate themselves. This is what Prabhupada was saying, because no one could annihilate them. Now, Krishna could have, you could argue, I could argue, we could get together and argue with Krishna, and say, hey, why don't you just send them back like you did with the residents of Vrindavan? Why'd you have to have them do what they did to send them back? It could have been nicer, more gentle. But they're Kshatriyas. They're Kshatriyas. And it was suited to their nature to have some combat. So he did it that way. No, he's not bound to doing a way that we think he should do it. He did it the way he did it. And for that, the reason, my understanding of the reason from what Prabhupada said is they were Kshatriyas. And their annihilation had to come that way. So he had them annihilate themselves because no one else could do it. No, it could have been gentler. Like in Vrindavan. He chose that way. They're Kshatriyas.
Okay. And then the second question was when like usually what you think about at the end of your life is where you go.
Yes.
But what about like those like pinda and those other like after ceremonies, like do they like uplift them after they have gone, or like what happened?
I was thinking about that question just this morning.
Okay.
Well, the way I was thinking about it was a little different than the way you said it. If the soul has already, this was my thought this morning, if the soul has already gone somewhere, what's the meaning of pinda? And the answer is, for those that go to Pitriloka, not everyone that dies goes to Pitriloka, by the way. Not everyone that's a forefather goes to Pitriloka. It's a very unique destination for those that are particularly attached to family and that portion of the Vedas where family likes to be with family. And so they're very pious, and it's a pious place. So the pinda to the forefathers is for that purpose. Let's say it otherwise. In a different way of saying the same thing, if somebody hasn't gone to Pitriloka, then offering pinda doesn't really amount to too much. Other than it's Vishnu Prasad offered to the forefathers, and because it's Vishnu Prasad, they get spiritual benefit wherever they've gone. But specific to offer to the forefathers who are in Pitriloka, it's a narrow percentage of the big pie of all living entities that leave their body that go to Pitriloka. But if they've gone to Pitriloka, the way that it works, according to Scripture, is there's nourishment that goes to them by offering pinda. And the conversely, so they continue to, there's a delightful place, and they continue to enjoy, and if it happens for generations, then they may take birth in the same lineage of family, because they're attached to family, and family attached to them. However, if the sacrifice of pinda to the forefathers is not performed, and someone's in Pitriloka, then they suffer terribly, bitterly. And it's said that sometimes that's where Yamaraj gets his recruits as Yamadutas, because they really want to get people that don't observe Dharma. They're vengeful because they had to suffer so much. Although normally Pitriloka it's a very delightful place. And do we honor for those who go to Pitriloka at least. Now, is that necessary? Supposing somebody's a Vaishnav and the Vaishnav departs, is it necessary? Or let's say those who were observing Prabhupada's departure, was it recommended for such a personality that you offer pinda to your departed spiritual master? That's a ritual that's subsumed, or it's a subset of the process of bhakti itself. But for those who are down in this realm of dharma, it's an important ritual, because the bhakti platform is not achieved yet. And so it's a ritual that so a lot depends on two things: elevation of consciousness and faith. And they're very closely related. Somebody that has faith in worshiping their forefathers, or let's say when somebody dies, because it's more connected to what your question is. Somebody dies. And so what should you do? What are rituals that a Vaishnav should observe for a deceased member of the family or friend or something like that? Not just like, a spiritual master, but just a family member. What should we do? What's some of the standard Vaishnav rituals? That's a question that people, especially during this COVID time, and many relatives died, whether the relatives were practicing Vaishnavas or not. Something. So, Vishnu Prasad, offered to that departed soul. Now, what's the benefit? Which is kind of what the question is. If they've already gone to somewhere, how are you benefiting? Because it's Vishnu Prasad. They get the benefit of your having offered Vishnu Prasad. No, it's not that the soul in its next place has a body and it comes and eats the Vishnu Prasad. It's the act of offering in their honor and their spiritual benefit that goes to that soul, regardless of what the destination is, in honor of that departed soul. It's like, offering prayers to a departed soul. It's a common thing that devotees ask of other devotees. Please pray for the departed soul of my friend, family member, relative, or whatever. Benefit, spiritual benefit, goes to the soul of that departed person, wherever they may be. It's a long-winded answer to your question. Sorry.
That was good. Yeah, so that means like they get spiritual benefits. So like, can they get like go to another place, or it's just like they just accumulate data?
It depends on where they've gone. If it's specific for Pitriloka, it's required.
Yeah, but I was just wondering, like, if you like offer Krishna Prasadam, do kirtan for them and all those things, can they like go to a better place, or is that since they're already in that place,
they're
wherever
already in
they
that
are,
place. They're already in that place, but they'll
Okay.
get spiritual benefit while they're in that place,
Okay.
whatever that place is.
Okay, and then the third question is kind of related to the one yesterday, but is it like, so if someone is like commits lots of sins and doesn't do like prayashchita and all those other things and isn't pious or a devotee, then do they like, is it like mandatory that people go to hell and then they get a body, or is it like they just like directly get a body? Like when, how is it like do you like purify some of your sins, like pay for some of your sins in hell and then go?
The rules, it's fuzzy. It's not black and white. I can describe principle, but then it's a little fuzzy of how that principle is applied. But based upon what you just said, as far as I understood your question is discussed in Canto 6, Chapter 1. When the Vishnu Dutas asked the Yamadutas, please describe who is to be punished and who is not to be punished, and what's the criterion. So they say, those who have done sin and they have not done atonement, they're to be punished. And the punishment is, we, the Yamadutas, take them to Yamaraj. Yamaraj decides what their destination is. And the destination, this is my understanding, they don't say this, my understanding is, that's how long it takes. It's a moment of our time, but in the lower planets, it's a long time. And the experience of hell is a long time, that's just a moment. And then what Prabhupada says is they then pray, let me out of here. Take a body of a worm. Yes, a body of a worm. Or the body of a whatever, a tree. Yes. So they have to pay those who are taken to Yamaraj. They're accountable for their sins that they did not atone for. It's just a law of nature. And so they have to pay, and it's a flash, but it's a lifetime's worth of experience. Just like in a dream, it can be a moment, and it's like a whole bunch of things happen in your dream. It's that subtle existence. So they have to pay for their sins, unless they've done something to counteract or atone for those sins.
So
Does that answer your question?
yeah, so I was wondering, like, what about the sins that we pay for in this life? Then, like, aren't
Well,
we
then
paying?
they're gone. The reaction is gone. The tendency to do again isn't gone.
Yeah. So, to like, what I mean is, like, it seems like some of the suffering from last life we are still paying for in this life. So if all of our sins were already paid for in hell, then why are we suffering, like, in this body?
Clever question. I'm trying to think of something that's from Scripture that gives an answer to your question. Nothing is coming to mind from Scripture that directly responds to your question. The logic of your question is clear. If I've suffered from this life or previous life, went to hell, there was my dues were paid for my sins, and now I take birth somewhere, and eventually come to the human form of life. Because here's another one. In the lower forms of life, up to the human form of life, they're not accruing new karma. It's burning off old karma. So I should be, not bearing old karma, because I experienced it. I got burned up to get to this human form. So where's that karma coming from in this life from a previous life? Well, let me read carefully and inquire a little bit. It's a good question. I'm sure it's not a loophole. I'm sure there's an explanation. It's just not coming. Do you have anything on that? Huh? He's going to say a few words. She's been reading the 5th canto, right? Yeah. Okay.
So the karma is classified into two, Sanchita karma and Prarabdha karma. Sanchita karma is like a savings account. And when an Atma takes a birth, it's a percentage of the savings account has been comes with the Jivatma, say 25% out of 100% is Prarabdha karma. And for that 25% to get drained, it may take several lifetimes that this Atma has to take birth. It is just not one lifetime that 25% can be drained. It may take multiple lifetimes for the 25% to drain. While the Atma is going through draining of this 25%, parallelly it's also accumulating additional karmas. So based on whatever the additional karmas, depends on the situation, it may be added to the existing karma to finish in the same life, or that can go back to the Sanchita karma as a savings account. Considering this calculation, there are situations based on the severity of the karmas that the Jivatma performs. it may have to take birth to finish it, or certain percentage of it may have to go to hell to suffer and come back again to continue where it left with the prarabdha karma.
So you're saying that one who goes to hell doesn't get rid of all their karma, just a percentage of their karma.
Yes, not at all. They're not finishing everything in hell. They have to only, certain percentage will be
Hell is
finished.
only a certain percentage is cleared away.
It's well, it seriously depends on the severity, and based on karma is a topic where you cannot go, 1:1 equal to 2. I mean, 1 plus 1 equal. That's not the way it works. It's totally a karma can be based on one lifetime, or you can get after 100 lifetime the reaction you do today. It likewise, going to hell is also based on a severity of the certain things, where you have to go there and suffer, not in the human body. So the wrong understanding that most of us have is, when you go to hell, your karmas are all finished. Then why do I have to take birth again? It's not finished. A certain part of it's only being suffered there, and you come back again to continue your prarabdha
There's
karma.
the key to the answer. And it depends. The answer of, how many years or what percentage, it depends on severity, etc. But severity being a big one. Let's go online, so our online people don't feel neglected.
Inner Tube from YouTube says, "What's your history of living in Chicago, Maharaj? Bhakti is forever. It's in your heart. Such a wonderful speaker. With such intelligence. Thank you."
Your mask made it hard to follow what you were saying.
Inner Tube on YouTube says, "What's your history of living in Chicago, Maharaj? Bhakti is forever. It's in your heart. You're such a wonderful speaker with such intelligence. Thank you."
Oh, Hare Krishna.
What's your history of living in Chicago, Maharaj?
When am I returning to Chicago? That's the question?
What's your history of
What's my history?
living in Chicago?
My history of living in Chicago. Really off topic. It's not a heavenly planet. It's not a hellish planet either. Well, my history in Chicago started with a traveling Sankirtan party. And there was many years ago, and there were 4 of us, and we were just traveling to colleges mainly, and we decided, let's go downtown Chicago. So we went downtown Chicago, and a paddy wagon came up, and police put us in a paddy wagon and took us off and put us in a jail. It's the only time I've been in jail in this lifetime was in Chicago. That was welcome to Chicago. And then they let us out and said, don't come back again. So we didn't. That was how my visit to Chicago started. Then I had a friendship with Prithu Shrava Prabhu from, going way back. And I knew that Prithu Shrava was the president in Chicago. And I knew that Prithu Shrava also liked college preaching. So I paid a visit. And we went for 2 weeks going north and then back to temple, and 2 weeks going south, and just visited colleges. And that's, my second visit to Chicago. And then, I was requested by the then GBC for Chicago was Badrinarayan Swami, come and help me. So I did. And anyway, it turned into a longer visit than just, helping Badrinarayan Swami. So I spent a fair amount of time in Chicago and then traveling around the Midwest, a lot focusing on colleges all around the Midwest. And then it became colleges and congregation, and that's what it's been, colleges and congregation. It's history. Next.
Arpana Rampe says, Hare Krishna Maharaj, if material body is composed of 5 elements like earth, water, fire, air, ether, what is spiritual body composed of, and will that body go through any transformations?
The spiritual body is made of the same thing Krishna's spiritual body is made of. Like a spark is made of the same thing the fire is made of. So the spiritual body is made of Satchitananda, and it has form. And spiritual form doesn't undergo transformation like we know. It's, but a word that Prabhupada used is, it's dynamic, not static. So, for example, what's dynamic and not static is when Krishna appears, he assumes a childlike form and so forth. But he has his eternal spiritual form in the spiritual world that does not undergo those transformations. That is to say, the transformation of Krishna's form was for the purpose of pastimes. And to assist him in his pastimes, his boyfriends, they were also little children, and then became little boys, and so forth. They were undergoing, but their forms were spiritual. But for the purpose of assisting Krishna's pastimes, it appeared to be, but it's not like the worldly kind of transformation, because there's no material change in that which is spiritual. So maybe it's a little difficult to understand what I just said, but that's my answer.
Sankari Dasi says, this is slightly off topic, in thinking about all the specifics that are given in the Bhagavatam about such historic topics like time, illusion, death, and the several different views on how such topics are perceived by different cultures and religions, and how some are drastically different from the Vedic conception, it seems like all this knowledge was lost or covered since the start of Kali Yuga. It seems like such drastic shifts from Dwarka to Kali. What is the reason that all this knowledge appeared to be lost at the start of Kali Yuga? Are all transitions between the yugas so drastic?
Sanchari, remind me to send you a link to a YouTube interview of Radhika Raman, where he discusses this topic. Not exactly this topic, but something close to this topic. And one of those answers is where there's truth, you'll find it manifest variously because it's truth. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur's answer is because there's different cultures, people will experience and understand that truth in various ways. It doesn't modify the truth. Now, Kali Yuga certainly distorts things terribly, but it's not because our the Vedic wisdom being eternal and other teachings appearing and undergoing change and so forth and so on. It's just that's the distortion effect of Kali Yuga. So what you've said is correct. Kali Yuga covers things and distorts things. At the same time, it doesn't mean that truth is lost. It's just variously manifest. And that you'll hear from Radhika Raman's nice interview. It's very, very, very intelligent. That's it. Okay.
One question from, you want to read?
She asks,
Who's she?
Rajeshwari Pran Mataji.
Okay.
She asks, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, this is a clarification question about liberated and conditioned state of the jiva. Due to ignorance, the jiva falsely identifies and develops relationships with the material nature, but it does not have substantiality as like in a dream. When the same jiva becomes intelligent, doesn't identify with material nature, that is liberated state. Avidya is created in the material world so living entities can enjoy separate from Krishna. In one sense, the pure spirit soul cannot escape from avidya to begin their material life, unless they begin bhakti. Is my understanding correct?
You get an A in your exam. Well done. Well done. More?
Yeah, she has another question. So we start our life here in a conditioned state and it gets thicker as
Thicker.
we
Or maybe thinner.
as we identify with material nature.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. There's more covering. To the degree that we're identifying with the temporary, there's more covering. Thank you for reading slowly and clearly. That was really good. Anyone else in the room? Yes?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Hare Krishna Maharaj. With regard to something you said this in the past hour. Yeah. So Maharaj, you have mentioned about bhakti. I remember with Roshni's answer, you were mentioning how the rituals could be actually superseded with bhakti. So if you could kindly give some more light on how can we be comfortable.
How can we
be comfortable thinking our bhakti is good enough?
Oh, never feel that your bhakti is good enough. Better to feel uncomfortable.
True. No, but with the mind going away here and there.
But that's not going to stop. By feeling comfortable, your mind's going to not go here and there?
No, Maharaj. Okay, if I feel like, okay, I'm doing bhakti, how am I going to be feeling like I'm doing bhakti?
Oh, you're looking towards Krishna.
Mm-hmm.
With a, wish to see Krishna smile. That's how you do bhakti. And you can feel, I'm not sufficiently pleasing Krishna. That's not like a negative feeling, that's an impetus feeling. You're familiar with that territory. We're all familiar with that territory. It's not, the goal is to not become comfortable, which is the starting point. But, could just continue to our capacity to go a little further, go a little further, go a little further, to our capacity. You're familiar with that, and that you're doing the right thing. So just don't worry about it. Just keep with you according to your capacity. You look towards Krishna so that Krishna will be pleased. And to your capacity, you continue with faith. And Krishna will smile and see, she's trying. Let me help her. That's our life. That's our program. I'm just noticing Prabhupada often uses the word, that's our business. Or that's our identity. That's the bhakti identity.
The push, is it enough?
But it's never enough. When's enough? Are the gopis feeling enough? Mother Jasoda is feeling enough? Never enough. And get used to it. In the stage of perfection, it's not enough. What's enough? It's always more. Not necessarily more quantitatively, but more qualitatively. Get used to it. That's the path of perfection. It's not feeling bad that it's not enough. It's an impetus to go the next step and go the next step. It's dynamic, not static. Enough is static. And not enough is dynamic. It's not negative. It's not an unpleasant feeling. It's a dynamic feeling. It's a please Krishna more feeling. You want it to be otherwise.
Mm. Are we pleasing Krishna? How will we know?
How will we know if we're pleasing Krishna? He'll smile. Have you seen Krishna smile? You can feel. It's subjective, but you can feel. And it's never enough. Isn't that our teaching? The instructions, the standard answer to your question is, when the instructions of the spiritual master are taken to heart, that's the way to know that Krishna is pleased. So ask yourself, that what I'm saying is very similar to what Bhishma Dev said to Maharaj Yudhisthira. Canto 1, Chapter 9, what Bhishma said to Yudhisthira. There are three things to look at. One, I'm abiding by the codes of theistic conduct. Two, I'm doing so under the guidance of qualified Vaishnavas and Brahmanas. And three, I'm doing those things for the purpose of pleasing Krishna. That's how you can know. Okay?
Okay, Maharaj.
All right.
Thank you, Maharaj.
I think we should end. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.